to another edition of our treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is entitled Two Types of Wisdom, and it's taken from James, the 3rd chapter, verses 13 through 18, and the 5th chapter, verses 7 through 12. And it's for August the 30th, 2020, summer quarter, lesson number 13. Now, a little background information. I just want to point out that this lesson is continuing on the same themes that we've been talking about for the last several weeks of wisdom, faith, and the importance, the supreme importance of our actions. And this lesson today is really focusing on how that actions are the important thing and not just memorizing facts and being able to recite back theological theories, but how we behave, how we treat people. Okay? Jumping up to James, the 3rd chapter, the 13th verse. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. Now, I want you to really make note of something here. How that Brother James is talking about humility and how that wisdom, true spiritual wisdom and humility are very closely linked together. And it's ironic that that's the case in a lot of respects because the worldly wisdom has a big thing about its arrogance, and people who think that they are so smart oftentimes tend to be extremely arrogant. Brother Peter was talking about how that our actions should give a good testimony in 1 Peter, the 2nd chapter, 12th verse. Live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that He visits us. So those deeds are how we should be giving out our testimony. And it's not just one deed or two deeds. It's just as Dr. Gill said several hundred years ago, that these good deeds are not a single act or two, but a series and course of living, which may be said to be good when it is ordered aright. But it's a continuous living that way. It's not just once to be seen or twice to be seen, but a habit, a daily habit. Okay? Jumping up to James, the 3rd chapter, 14 through 16. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. So we see how James is making that contrast between spiritual wisdom and earthly wisdom, and how that earthly wisdom is linked to selfish ambition and selfish wishing someone else to fail or not do well, and wanting to uh, lord over another individual, either in the natural or in church. People can have worldly wisdom and demonic ambition over preaching or teaching or being a big shot in the church. If we really latch on to only wanting to be the top dog in every situation we find ourselves in, if we really latch on to that, that is what leads to this worldly, unspiritual, earthly, demonic ambition that natural wisdom, unhealthy wisdom, worldly wisdom grows out of. You know, Paul's talking to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 2 and 14. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness, and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit. So we see here how Paul is talking about how that people with worldly wisdom and without spiritual wisdom can't understand the wisdom, the godly wisdom, the true holy wisdom that God wants us to have. Okay, James 3rd chapter, verses 17 through 18. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Now, in this day that we live in this political climate that we live in our country, if the church ever needed to hear that message, if Dottie Bryson ever needed to hear that message, it's in the day that we live in. Godly wisdom, the only wisdom that means anything, the pure wisdom, the heavenly wisdom, is peace-loving. It's considerate of other people's feelings. It's submissive. Its goal is not to dehumanize and to harm and to show out against somebody else, either in person or on Facebook or Twitter or what have you. Godly wisdom is a peace-loving, considerate wisdom. Let me tell you something that God convicted me about, and deep in my spirit impressed on me. I was always really bad, horrible, about when I was discussing things with people. biblical doctrines that we may have a little bit of a disagreement and different opinion about. If I would be discussing something with someone, I would not be listening to what they said. I would be, while they were talking, formulating how I was going to prove my point instead of genuinely listening to the other person. And that held true in business, that held true in church, it held true in the ministry, and the Lord got a hold of me about that. I need to, when I'm interacting with someone, I need to be actually listening to what they have to say and to be considerate of their opinions. The whole purpose of communicating is not to make yourself look like a big shot and someone else to look silly. That is not the purpose of communicating. And the Lord got a hold of me about that. I guess probably about 10 years ago, where I got convicted over it. And I try now, as much as possible, to open my ears and actually listen to what someone else has to say, because that is the way godly wisdom, heavenly wisdom works. It's peace-loving, it's considerate, it's submissive. It's quick to admit that it's wrong when it's wrong. It is a horrible indictment on somebody's character if they refuse to admit that they are wrong when they are obviously wrong, in the face of all reality and all facts, to keep arguing past that point. That is absolute, utter arrogance and foolishness to do that. James, the 5th chapter, 7 and 8. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Now, some of you may very well be farmers. The vast majority of us nowadays are not farmers. The vast majority of us nowadays work in other industries. But at the time that James was talking, the vast majority of people were farmers. And they completely understood this concept. They lived by this concept of going out, sowing the seed, waiting for that initial rain, that former rain, that autumn rain, while they were sowing. And then that spring rain when they were harvesting. And even though those little bitty seeds, they sowed little bitty seeds, that those seeds would come up. And James is reinforcing that imagery to his readers of how that if you sow with wisdom and patience in kindness and gentleness, that you would receive a harvest, that the harvest was coming as long as you stand firm and keep working that field. You know, Brother Paul told the Galatians in Galatians 6 and 9, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. See, that key is do not give up. Keep tilling that field. Keep working for the Lord. Keep doing the right things. The harvest is coming. You may not see it at this moment. It may look like it is bleak. That ground may look like it is so barren and is never going to grow. But if we hang on and we keep tilling that field, the harvest is going to happen. Okay? Jumping up to James, the 5th chapter, 10 and 11. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of sufferings, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Now think about Brother Job as he, everything turned against him. You take the year 2020, multiply it by 1,000 times, and that's the kind of year that Brother Job had. But he hung on. He kept the faith. He hung on to what God would have him to be and for what God would have him do. And he hung in there. And the harvest came. And if we approach life the same way that Brother Job did, we're going to experience the same thing. Now, Jesus was talking about in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 11 and 12, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Count it all joy when this happens to you. Okay, James, the 5th chapter, 12th verse. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. Now, this is something we all need to take to heart. And it's easy. Now, I'm not talking about cussing. It's real obvious to Christians that they should not cuss. Real obvious. Now, I know that some people claim to be Christians and cuss up a blue streak. And, you know, and I've seen people do that. Uh, Now, I'm not talking about that. That's obviously wrong, And people who do that are just, they're silly. It's obviously wrong. But there's also uh, using bywords that a lot of times that have become socially acceptable, that a lot of times we have a tendency to do that. I've even caught myself doing that. Now, I'm not talking about cussing, but I'm talking about, using um, just bywords. We should not be doing that neither. Sermon on the Mount, Jesus also said in Matthew 5:34 through 37, "But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simple yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." So we need to be careful, careful what we say and how we say it. Now, concluding thoughts. Let me just say that uh, godly wisdom is meek and calm. And if we're going to be wise and show the wisdom of the Lord, that's what we need to be, is meek, calm, and humble. Well, friends, good Lord willing, I'll be back with you next weekend.